Cheers. So, I've had these a couple weeks now, basically. I want to do a quick video discussing them. Some, I guess, compliments and concerns about them. So, this was, and you can see it right here, this is made by Rancourt. I think they pronounce it Dirigo, but you can see the box back there. It's, by Rancourt and Company. If you go to their site, and maybe I'll throw up on the side here kind of like their little spiel about it, but apparently it's like a phrase that's used, I think it's Latin or something, but used out in it's used out in Maine, basically. And they basically talk about using kind of, I guess, extra materials, discontinued stuff, I think just kind of like leftovers, stuff they're trying to clear out, and they will take those materials, whether it's the leather, whether it's the sole, and make a run of shoes or boots. And it's kind of a thing. Again, I think they kind of say they made a reference somewhere about it to Maine. I guess I'll throw it up here. I don't know if it's specifically them or maybe it's a Mainers kind of thing. You hear the term Mainers, people from Maine. But anyway, this is like a sub-brand, sort of, maybe more of just a category or like a line, you could say, within the Rancourt models. And in this case, I thought it was really cool. So the main thing with these is you probably picked this up at this point, it's the third pair, but I really like the Venetians from Rancourt. I find they fit my foot better than, say, the penny loafer that I had that was actually in Oak Street, but made by Rancourt. These fit my foot well. The last, which, these three pairs that I own are all in the 114 last, they call it. But I also really appreciate the styling. So it's very simple and clean, I guess, is what it is. And I appreciate that. You still get the moccasin, hand done moccasin construction, but you don't have too much kind of flair going on. It's, just like, to me, the definition of a loafer. It's, it's kind of simple and straightforward. There's been some differences in the different models. One, it was just my marine field pair, it's just literally cut leather on the top, whereas this pair and the chrome pack pair I had, those and these have this kind of nicer rolled top, you could say. I kind of think back to like Nick's customizations, they called that a rolled top, so it's like kind of like a rolled top. This is the only one that has, or sorry, the chrome pack pair doesn't have this, but I think definitely the marine field pair has this, where they hand sew the back. I forget what they call this. This is sort of like, just like, the mock toe stitch, hand sewn there, like they hand sew this part back here. And that's kind of like kind of like part of the definition of these loafers and moccasin construction shoes, where it's kind of old timey and traditional, I guess is really the word I was looking for. These are really comfortable. So this is a Bone Snuffed Suede. I'll throw the photo up that I threw out on a post, but this is actually a Horween product. It's peculiar to me how I don't know if like the person writing the website descriptions is like not in the know, or they're like being intentionally ambiguous, but like this is a Horween Snuffed Suede, but it doesn't actually say that on the site. So I'll throw up the listing, and I just feel like you would want to advertise that. So I don't know why they wouldn't say that. Did the product person not even realize it was Horween and didn't bother to just flip the hides over? It's peculiar. That's a name brand in the, we all believe in the leather space. So it's one of the premier, in my opinion, like one of the best, if not the best. I'm biased because I'm an American, so it's an American tannery. Why would you not say that? So that's just odd to me. This is Horween leather, this is Horween suede, and they didn't advertise it, so that's peculiar. It's cool because they even cut the footbeds out of this. I thought my last pair, the chrome pack, was the same, but one of them is kind of getting screwed up, and I'm unsure if it really is the same leather. This is definitely the same leather. I mean, the color, the feel, everything is the same. So that's kind of a nice feature that they cut the whatever you call it, sock liner. It's kind of like a 3/4 at least 2/3, but probably considered a 3/4 sock liner. And then there's like, you know, foam under it. They seem to put foam under them, but it's matching. This sole is really neat. Again, I'll have the listing up to kind of show what they call it. It's branded Rancourt and Company, but they had a name for it that was kind of interesting. But it basically has like cork impregnated in the rubber, and I thought that was kind of neat. What else? I think that's kind of it. You know, very simple. You know, obviously one of them already had, you know, I've actually used my suede eraser and little brush a couple times already, but you know, they get stains, as you can imagine, very easily, and even just water drips. You can rub it a little, kind of hides it, but I'm not sure how well it's coming out in the camera. But you know, you spill a little bit of water from the sink on the top of your shoe, and you know, it's kind of there. But I knew that getting into it, and if it gets to the point where it's horrendous, I could always like throw Venetian shoe cream on them, which will, in my opinion, kind of destroy the suede, but it would darken the whole thing consistently. You know, that is an option. I don't want to do that, but depending on if they get really stained up, it's something to consider. But that could be why this wasn't popular and why they're kind of getting rid of it with this Dirigo run or whatever, because maybe it's too light and people didn't like it. Something that I found, I don't know how to put this. It's like half of me feels like this is expected, and this is why I'll never pay full price for Rancourts, because it just seems like every pair has some kind of little issues. I still like them, and I'll continue to buy the brand. But like, look at this. And I even contacted them about this. They said this is not intentional. But if I line up the fronts, sorry, make sure this is on the camera well. If I line up the front sole right there, and then you run it back, that ain't right. I measured them all out and sent them an email with some pictures, but clearly this sole and this sole are not the same size. So either these are 11.5 D. Either this is an 11.5 sole and this is a 12, or this is 11.5 and this is 11. But they're clearly, if you measure it, there's a 1/4 of an inch difference. And it's not like they sand these. These are just, you know, molded and then stitched on. So they didn't even use the same sizing sole on each shoe. And the fact that that got through quality control is kind of sad in my opinion. It was pretty obvious to me as soon as I held them up to each other. And then there's some other little stuff. Some of this I think is kind of hard to avoid, but there's some extra holes here and there. And if you see the construction videos on these, they have to kind of nail them onto the last, and then they stitch it and try to stitch through those same holes. My guess is when they were hand sewing this, they realized if they used that hole, it would kind of make the stitch line crooked. And they made a decision that they would rather have, and I agree with it, it would be better to have a straight line, you know, straight, it's handmade, but straighter line than have it cockeyed just to use the hole. That hole there isn't horrendous. It's not really obvious to see. This one's a little bit worse. You really can see that, you know, from looking down at your feet, but I don't really care. I'm assuming it was they punched it and realized it was wrong or something. I don't know, with the little awl. But, you know, I just see that kind of stuff in all of them. This one has, I think, yeah, there's an extra hole right there. The holes don't really matter. I think the sole being not the same size for each shoe is, I think, kind of a little bit extreme. But I would say I was wearing them, you know, trying them on, making sure they were good, and didn't notice anything, and walked around on carpet. And it wasn't until I took them off and looked at them side by side that I saw that. So I'm like, you know what? You know, in the spirit of supporting American production, I'm going to just wear them. I did want to know, and I wanted them to know about it. So like I said, I did email. I think it was David Creamer, I think is the guy who replies to when you email their customer service or whatever. And he did say, you know, this was not intentional, and he would let the team know, like, you know, try to do better. Would be curious is if I've seen photos, and these are usually stamped on the top with a size, these soles, like when they buy them from a factory. whoever produces them, whether it's Vibram or whatever. This isn't a Vibram product, but it's possible the manufacturer stamped one of them wrong. I don't think that's the case. I doubt that. I think it's more likely the person, maybe one 11 and 11 and a half were put together, and they were like rubber banded on a shelf, and they just grabbed the set thinking it was, good, and built them. I think you'd think you would look at them and notice that they don't say the same number on them, but I guess it just shows a slight lack of attention to detail. But I'm still happy with them. That does bum me out a little bit, but they were already pretty, I would say pretty affordable, and then they were running, right when they dropped these, they already had a deal for, or maybe it was at the same time, I forget, where all the outlet stuff, and they put the Dirigo, these loafers and the boots that I bought went immediately into the outlet, and they had an outlet 10% off. So these were $187 shipped, no, free shipping, no tax, with the 10% off. So you know what? I'm like, honestly, there's imported stuff for that pricing. You think of like, some of the brands that are, I guess, like fashion brands, Cole Haan, or Ralph Lauren. I know Ralph Lauren, sometimes it's American, but they'll charge that much money, and they're not made in USA. And I guess it's just, I felt it was good enough. But you could kind of sense my hesitation. It does frustrate me, and I guess part of the issue was I'd read some not so great things about contacting them for returns and exchange. I would have exchanged them, but I was like, you know what? That's going to be weeks of probably turnaround, where I got to get a label and ship it back, whatever. And I'm like, it's a 1/4 of an inch. I'm just going to freaking wear them. So I guess it's a little bit odd. Normally I kind of can't handle that stuff and just return or exchange, but in this case I'm like going to go with it, and he confirmed it would not matter for a resole. So if I ever wear these rubber soles out completely, when I get them resoled, at least they could put 2 of the correct size soles on them. I don't know if I'd ever wear them to that point, and I'd have to look at the cost of a resole anyway, but I kind of feel like a shoe like this, by the time it's ready for a resole, will be so nasty and stained up that I wouldn't necessarily do it. I'd probably just donate them, but we'll see. Yeah, happy with them. I think if the sole thing wasn't what it was, with the mismatch and that kind of quality control failure, and and I guess maybe I was giving them a chance to be like, no, we had like a pride thing. That's completely unacceptable. We apologize. I'm going to send you a label right now, and exchange them. Then I kind of thought, well, they want to uphold their good quality. The fact that it was just like, no, we don't care, or no, sorry, no, we didn't plan to do that, but like there wasn't a strong interest of the brand to exchange them, kind of bummed me out a little bit. I guess I didn't want to be like, I don't know. I wanted them to initiate the, like, that's unacceptable for our, it doesn't live up to our quality. You see brands do that sometimes. So I think if this whole sole thing wasn't there, I would have had, a very positive experience with these. It's still positive, but that kind of took them down a little bit. But I still like them. I've been wearing them, like I said, almost every day for 2 weeks now. Super comfortable. I really like, I don't know what it is about this last, and how it must not be the same last as what those Oak Street pairs were, and the pattern. But with these, they don't have heel slip issues, and they're very comfortable. And something like this with the soft suede, your toes can kind of push out a little bit, and it doesn't feel weird. And the sole's really cool. I really like the cork embedded in there, and maybe it'll show up more as they start to wear out. So I was very, and I kind of like this. I was reading a thing about it where some guy was saying he won't buy any moccasin construction shoes or whatever without whatever they call this backstitch. Sometimes they'll just like kind of wrap the back under it, and you won't have this. Whereas he thought it was sort of the signature, as much of a signature as the mock stitch itself for those kind of Maine style moccasin shoes. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's certainly kind of neat. You know, some boat shoes have this too, whereas the other, or at least the last pair of Rancourts I bought, you know, it's just kind of a cleaner, where the back kind of just wraps under, and you don't see that. So that's kind of neat. I think I'm rambling at this point. Cheers, guys.